and with our, I think we will find also relation to our situation as well, which is that Yom Ha'atzmaut, which we just finished a few hours ago, for many years, the central celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut was a military parade, was parading the army and military equipment around the cities of Israel. It's pretty much stopped recently, but still. And then there was that the army bases are open, and people would come to visit the army base and also look at army equipment and get some sort of tour, which is also a tradition that seems to have pretty much ended. And so, what I want to think about is the relationship with our relation to war in general, and what does it really mean? What is the place of war? And what I wanted to use the source, the springboard for that discussion, is the Mishnah, which is in front of you, hopefully on your screen, in source Aleph, which is a Mishnah from Masechet Shabbat. Masechet Shabbat is discussing what is muksa and what is not muksa. Muksa is a rabbinic concept that we're all very, very familiar with. We have in our shul, once a month, we have shut, questions and answers for the children of the Kila, together with the Rav of the Kila. And the kids can ask whatever they want, and hopefully the rabbi is able to answer them. And the question of muksa comes up every single month. There's something, is this muksa, is that muksa? Muksa has become a very important part of our observance of Shabbat. But muksa is a reasonably new concept in Talmudic terms, in the fact that there are Rabbi Shimon who doesn't hold there is such muksa. And so there's a tremendous discussion in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, and later in the Gemara, what is muksa, and what is exactly is the reason for muksa, and what things are considered muksa or not. And you understand the concept of muksa is toksenu hoksal tamidato. A person has removed something from their mind, from midato, and I'm saying that I'm not going to use that thing on Shabbat because it is not a Shabbat related item. So we could not use a pen, because a pen is used for writing, and writing is a non-Shabbat activity, and therefore we would say that a pen is muksa. The Mishnah has a long list of things such as that, and one of them is the Mishnah in front of us. Lo yetze ish lo b'sayf velo b'keshev velo b'tris velo b'eilach ala velo b'romach v'in yetze chayav chatat. A person should not go out carrying a saif, a sword, a keshet, a bow. A tris is a piece of armor. Velo ba'ala is also a type of protection. Velo b'romach, a spear. We shouldn't go out with clay avodah. V'in yetzeh chayav chatat. And if a person went out in those wearing those things, that would be considered a chatat. That would have to bring a sin offering. And the reason for that is those things are not related to Shabbat. And therefore, they are muksa. Why chayav chatat? Because we cannot even claim that those things are clothing. Generally, we're talking about a person going with a sword or a bow or armor or a spear. Those are things that may be worn on the body. And since they are worn on the body, we could argue that that's clothing. And since it's clothing, it can be carried on Shabbat from my domain outside of my domain. Says the Mishnah, no person who wears such a thing is not only is it a problem of muksa, but it's also a problem of carrying, because we are carrying them from my domain outside. That's the Tanna Kamma. Rabbi Eliezer said, Tachshitim memlo. They are not considered to be prohibited items. Rather, they are tachshitim. They are ornaments. They are jewelry that a person should wear. So we see a Mishnah, a machloket in the Mishnah, as to whether wearing items of war, armory, and armaments, whether they are considered to be clothing or not. Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that those things are tachshitim. They are ornaments. And the Tanakama is of the opinion that they are not ornaments. That's an argument about Shabbat. Continues the Mishnah, "V'hachamim omrim einam ele gnai." They can't possibly be ornaments because it's a gnai. It is a slur that we should have such a thing. It is a detriment that we should have such a thing. What do we know? There's a pasuk. Shene'emar v'kitetu chorvotem le'itim v'chanitohem lemizmarot v'lo yisa goy el goy cherev v'lo yilmadu od milchama. Because Yeshayahu says, he says in a verse that la'atid, that at one point we will break up our swords into plowshares and our armaments into plows or into pruning shears. V'lo yisagoy al goy cherev, that the one nation will not raise a sword against another nation. And they will not learn again war. I think that verse from Isaiah, from Yeshayahu, is engraved in the entrance to the United Nations in New York. That the idea that having a League of Nations will stop war, and therefore war will become a thing of the past. And what will we do with the armaments? They will be made into tools of agriculture. We will use them to plow and to sow and to increase good in the world, and therefore we will not need more war anymore. This Mishnah is a halachic discussion, whether a gun is considered muksa or not. It's a sheila, a very appropriate question today in Israel, as to whether a person, a soldier who is carrying a gun, can they carry a gun on Shabbat, or would on Shabbat that be considered muksa? It's all based on this machloket in this Mishnah. And the Mishnah says that the Tanakama holds that a gun and armaments are muksa and are not considered something that we should be using and carrying on Shabbat. Rabbi Eliezer says they are considered to be an ornament, and therefore it is glorious that we should have such a thing, and therefore they are not considered to be muksa because there is a use for them on Shabbat. When the Nazir, Rav David Cohen, he was one of the foremost students of Rav Kook. His son, Rav Shar Yeshuva Cohen, was the rabbi of Haifa. He died recently, and Rav Shar Yeshuva Cohen was an officer in the army. And when he came to be married, he came from, I think even from war, from out of the army. He came in his army uniform. And the rabbis of Jerusalem who came to the wedding were a little horrified. How can somebody come to their wedding not wearing a suit and a tie and a hat and regular? Why did they come in the army uniform? And the Nazir said about his son, this is bigdei kuna. These are the clothing of the Kohen. This is a something we should be proud of, that we're able to wear this clothing. This is bigdei Kohen. And that seems to be the appropriate answer of Rabbi Eliezer. But the rabbis disagree. The rabbis say that armaments in themselves are a slur, are not a good thing. We don't want to have war. How do we know that? Because Isaiah's eventual prayer, Yeshayahu's eventual nevuah, was that we would get to the point that we would not need to have war. We would not need to fight, and we would not need to have armaments, and we would not need to have weaponry, and we wouldn't need to have an army. That would be Yemot HaMashiach, that we won't, lo yisa goy al goy cherev v'lo yemadu od milchama, that we won't fight anymore. And that the latid lavo, that the eventual redemption will be that we won't fight anymore. And that seems to be something that we're praying for. As we said, that's the United Nations, the League of Nations. It later became the United Nations. That their promise, whether they fulfill that or not, is a very good question. But their promise was that we won't have to fight anymore. And so the Gemara, the Mishnah, while discussing a question about Shabbat, takes this whole question about what is the place of war, what is the place of conflict in our view, in our worldview of what is normal. According to Rabbi Eliezer, war is normal. People are always going to fight with each other. Nations are going to fight. That's normal. And while that happens, we also need to fight. And therefore, that a Jew should carry a gun or that a Jew should carry a spear is not a bad thing. It's an ornament. And like the Nazir said, it's bigdei Kohen. Hachamim have a very different approach. The Hachamim say no. It's a concession to the fact that we people fight. But that's not an armament, that's not an ornament, that's not a tachshit, that's a b'di'evet, that's a de facto that we should have war. How do we know that? Because the prophecy for the end of days is no war, is having no war. Rabbi Eliezer seems to know that prophecy. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't seem to think that prophecy doesn't exist. So what does he do with that? How can we say on the one hand that fighting and war is a good thing and that we celebrate it and we have Yom Ha'atzmaut, as we say, at military parades, etc. And on the other hand, we can still hold that we would like there to be no more war. We'd like the end of war. Imagine a world, as John Lennon said, in which there's no war. There's no reason, nothing to fight for. And where do we hold on that question? And if we look in the Nevi'im and we look in our sources, there seems to be, in fact, somewhat a dichotomy about do we think war is a good thing or a bad thing. We know that the Tanakh is full of wars. We know that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov fought wars. We know that David HaMelech fought wars. David HaMelech fought so many wars and was successful that the fact that Pasuk says in Divrei Hayamim that the reason that David HaMelech was not able to build the Beit HaMikdash was that he had been involved in too many wars. And the answer should be, and what the Mefarshim ask on that, is if that's the case, then why did the HaKadosh Baruch Hu send him to so many wars? Why was war so important? What is the place of war? And Rav Kook is writing, Rav Kook discusses this in the 1880s, well before the First World War, but Rav Kook also writes later, we won't see it today, but he will refer again back to his idea that he had in his 20s. He will refer back during the First World War. What is the place of war? Obviously, we don't want to fight anymore. We don't want to have military strength. However, I don't know if any of you saw yesterday, here in Modi'in, we didn't get to see it. But in Yerushalayim, I think you did get to see it. You saw the Matas, you saw the flyover of the Israeli Air Force, and I'm sure that it was incredibly impressive. And we say, look, this amazing Air Force we have, this amazing army we have, we're very proud of the Israeli army that we fight and we're the best fighters. So on the one hand, we want peace. On the other hand, we have war, and we think war, if we excel at war, we excel at beating our enemies. So what is it? Which of these two do we really want? Do we want peace, or do we want to excel at war? What is it they're wanting? And that's what Rav Kook writes about in the passage that we're going to see. Go back to the sheet. Rav Kook, and there's a long passage. We're not going to see the whole thing today, but he speaks about this because the Gemara continues. Maybe at later times that we come to learn together, we will see the continuation of the Gemara and a continuation of Rav Kook's explanation. But here in Einaya, in 3 separate passages, in Shabbat, as you see here, the reference, Mem Bet, Mem Gimel, and Mem Dalet, Rav Kook speaks about that exact question. What is our relationship between, on the one hand, war, and on the one hand, peace? What is that? Where do we find ourselves? What is the Tanakh? Where does the Kodesh Baruch Hu want us to be? Rav Kook says the following: Hagvura, strength. And when we say Gvura, we speak a lot about Gvura on Yom HaZikaron, on the Remembrance Day, that we remember, that we commemorate the fallen soldiers and those that were killed in terrorist attacks. We speak about Gvura, about Gibur, about strength, about heroism. Hagvura, says Rav Kook, shehi la'atzma hi tachshit. Strength in of itself is an ornament. That somebody is strong. Remember that the Mishnah in Masechet Avot says, Ezu Gibor hakoveshet yitzro. Who is strong? One who overcomes his evil inclination. The Mishnah does not say who is strong. Being strong is a bad thing. And it was for many, and we spoke last week when we met, that for many centuries and even millennia, the Jewish people were not able to show physical strength. But strength in itself is not only physical, it's a state of mind. It's the belief that there's something beyond my ability at the moment that I could get to. And therefore, if I am strong and overcome my evil inclination, I say that I'm getting beyond my nature. In nature, I would be led by the Yetzer Hara. And yet I decide to overcome the Yetzer Hara, to go beyond the Yetzer Hara. So Gvura lehitgaber, mitgaber ka'ari, says the verse. Litgaber is to overcome the norm. That in itself is a tachshit, that a person realizes there are things that are worth pursuing. We spoke about last time that Eretz Israel is beyond nature, and therefore to achieve it we need to be supernatural. Like we spoke about Yisurim, you'll remember, that the ability to have strength in of itself is commendable. It's a tachshit. The fact that we are strong, that's a good thing. Why, says Rav Kook? The strength of life in all of its aspects is good and beautiful. And when we see somebody that is build themselves up and becomes strong, whether that strength be mental, spiritual, or physical, that is something that is commendable, that is good to see. That is something that we aspire. We give prizes for people who are giburim, for people who have overcome the natural inclination not to succeed, not to excel. And therefore we commend that, we commemorate that. And therefore that is a good thing. And that in itself is connected in its essence, in its natural state, in its essence, with Gvurat Nefesh, with overcoming, with a spiritual overcoming. As we said, that idea of Gvura means that here's an obstacle that we could say, there's an obstacle, I'm sorry, I can't overcome it. However, when we realize there's a way to overcome that obstacle, if I put an effort, if I think, if I did have determination, I will overcome that. That's Gvura. And that overcoming could be a physical obstacle, it could be a spiritual obstacle, it could be an intellectual obstacle. It could be that if I really put in all my effort, I will crack this code. I will find the antidote to this virus. And so the Gvura, which again we say we commend, I'm sure that the person who will find the vaccine for COVID-19, not only will they become very wealthy, but they'll be lauded throughout the world. And I'm sure that people will say they should win Nobel Prizes and other things because they did a great thing for mankind. There's an obstacle, I overcame it. There's a Yetzer Hara, I overcame it. Those same idea, the Gvura, the ability to overcome, shows a determination that's connected also to a spiritual determination. Because if it's only a physical strength, then I'm just strong. I'm as strong as I'm able to be. I'm as strong as I'm able to push myself. But if I see there's an end, there's a point at which that's the achievement is worth it, then I will go and do whatever I can to achieve that. The achievement will be to protect my people. I have an enemy. I need to overcome them. We will do whatever we can, whatever it takes in order to overcome them, because the aim, the task is so worthwhile. The benefit is so great that I'm willing to make the effort to do it. And therefore, says Rav Kook, any strength is also connected to spiritual strength. That comes with its purity and with its straightness, with its a desire to get to a better place, to a higher place. Al Kain, says Rav Kook, and therefore the external signs of strength, we said before, the sword and the bow and the spear and the armor, also are ornaments. Well, Rav Kook's asking an interesting question. All right, we asked, why is something muksa and why is something not muksa? We said that muksa is something that I don't use on Shabbat. And therefore, using on Shabbat, ipso facto makes it not muksa. So I could say eyeglasses. Are they muksa on Shabbat? Clearly not. I need them. Because if I don't use them, I can't see a thing. And therefore, it clearly are not muksa. Why do we say that, let's example, we said before, a gun. Why would it be muksa on Shabbat? Because you don't have a use for it. Why? Because you shouldn't be doing war on Shabbat. But if I'm using it in order to protect myself or protect my community or protect my country, then clearly it's not muksa. But Rabbi Eliezer doesn't say it's not muksa. Rabbi Eliezer used a very interesting word. Rabbi Eliezer said it's a tachshit, it's an ornament. How can it be an ornament? You could say it's a need, but I don't think we can say it's an ornament. Now, sometimes if you have a very ornate glasses or a very ornate watch, then you could say it's an ornament. But most things that we use are not necessarily non-muksa because they're ornaments. They're non-muksa because they have a use. Rav Kook goes to a deeper idea and says that if the tools of war are an external expression of strength. They're not strength in itself. We've spoken about that before when we spoke about Rav Kook's poem related to the 3 weeks in which Rav Kook speaks about Gvura Ruchanit. Some of you will recall that we spoke about that. The Gvura Ruchanit is an inner strength, not an external strength. If I have a gun, I'm not really strong. If I have a gun, I'm only as strong as my gun. I'm only as strong as my armaments. And so what makes me strong, my armaments or myself? Well, clearly I'm only as strong as my armaments. If you've got a bigger armament, a stronger gun, and I've got a weaker gun, then you're going to be stronger than I am. Neither of them are really strong. And therefore, remember that idea is that two people are being chased by a leopard, and one of them starts thinking, how are we going to fight back at the leopard? And the other one just puts on his running shoes and starts running. And the first man says to the second man who's running, you think you can outrun the leopard? He says, no, but I can outrun you. And so once I've outrun you, I'm already okay. The leopard's going to get you. So once strength becomes something external, so then my money is as strong as my armaments. Rav Kook says something very deep. He says that the weapons are an expression of the whole concept of strength. And the question really in the Mishnah now becomes not a question of is a gun muksa or not muksa, but what is the attitude that we have to strength? And when strength becomes my ability to overcome an obstacle, that I see an obstacle in front of me and I say, this is not going to stop me, we're going to do this because the aim, the end, the benefit is so great that I will overcome that, then that strength is something that is positive and something that is beautiful and something that's ornate. And therefore, while the tools of war we could discuss, are they good or bad, the concept of strength, the concept of saying, here's an obstacle that I'm going to overcome, that I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to have to go through it and deal with it and fight it and find a way to overcome it, because otherwise the end point will be so bad, will be so tragic, will be such a lack that I will always regret it. That I didn't overcome, that I laid down and let that obstacle stop me. Once I do that, once I say, no, I'm going to overcome it, that strength in itself is an ornament to humanity. That's something that we say, here's something that I have a higher desire, a higher importance, a higher purpose that I'm willing to fight for. And it's a very interesting idea, because now it stops becoming muksa, not muksa, good or bad. It becomes a tachshit. It becomes, how do we ornate ourselves? What do we find things that are worth fighting for? And I think it was Nietzsche who said that if there's something that that's an importance to fight for, we'll find a way to fight for it. Once we say, these are the things that are important to me, those are the things that I want to learn how to overcome. Or I want to overcome the things that stop me achieving those things that are important for me. And therefore, if war enables us to protect the Jewish people, because what's important is the Jewish people, what's important is the preservation of the community, the preservation of society, that's important, and therefore we'll find a way to do that. That strength in itself becomes something that we don't say that it's ornate and wonderful, but the idea that we have that desire to be strong, to overcome that obstacle that stopped us achieving our aim, that in itself is ornate. That in itself, as we said, is praiseworthy. That in itself is also will be cherished by yourselves and by others. And that's the nature, says Rav Kook, of Gvura at all, across the board. That when strength shows, and strength is a declaration of my belief that I can overcome this obstacle, and that it's worth overcoming the obstacle, that what's on the other side of the obstacle is so worthwhile that I'm going to overcome it. And when we think about it, that's really strength. And that's really what exactly the Mishnah says about strength that's in the spiritual sense, in the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, we could lie down and say, okay, that's just the Yetzer Hara. You spoke about it last time, that we could just say, we're not going to get Olam Haba. All right, Nebuch. I wasn't able to overcome my desires. They were too strong. I didn't make it. Why do we have a desire to overcome our evil inclination and to be better people? Because we believe being better people is worth it, is so beneficial that even though it's a struggle against Yetzer Hara, and it may be for some people a daily struggle and an hourly struggle and a struggle every moment, it's worth it because the benefit that I have is so great that it's worth undergoing that struggle. And therefore the struggle itself becomes something that's worth it. And we're speaking last week, we're speaking about exercising. And I spoken also in my shul, also on Zoom, on Yom HaZikaron about exercising. And I said that really we could get to exercise, if we could have the achievement without exercise, then we would like to have that. And a woman wrote to me and she said, I'm a marathon runner. I was a woman in my shul. And I disagree. In fact, I love the effort, the idea, the journey, the getting there is as important for me. Obviously, I like to run the finishing line, but the getting there, and she said it's akin to learning Daf Yomi. So Daf Yomi, I love learning Daf Yomi. I learn every Daf, but the effort, the getting there, the half an hour that I spend every day learning, half an hour, 45 minutes, breaking my head as I did this morning to understand the Daf, that the journey is important, not only the final achievement. And now the journey becomes something that is praiseworthy. If I would see someone learning, I don't say, well, Nebuch, you didn't finish the whole daf. I noticed that there were 3 dapim in Masechet Yevamot that you skipped over a little bit, so you didn't really get to Siyum HaShas. No, we would say, that's wonderful. Kol HaKavod, you put in an effort. That's amazing. Why? Because your declaration is that I'm putting in effort to something that is worthwhile. And that's gvura, that's strength. Strength is to say, what is it that is worthwhile for us? And really the question that the Mishnah is raising, now that we understand Rav Kook's understanding, is a very deep one. The Mishnah is saying, what is it that's important for us? What do we consider a tachshit? What do we consider an ornament? What is it that's important for us? And those things we have to now go and achieve. Can we imagine we had something that was so important and we didn't achieve it? Well, we'd say, Nebuch. Well, how can you live with that? You didn't make any effort to do it. I had no effort to get there. Then obviously it's not, what you're saying is it's not that important for you. You know, someone says, I really wanted to come to the shiur, but I just didn't make it. Why not? You know, something happened on the way. I said, okay, well, obviously it's not that important for you. If it was that important for you, you would have made it. You would have turned up. So obviously, I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. Maybe you came to another shiur that was even better. Maybe a shiur that was more, that was deeper, that was had a greater influence on you. Fine. But the idea is that if you didn't turn up, then basically your declaration is, it's not that important for me. Otherwise, you would have made the effort. And therefore, gvura itself, says Rav Kook, is a tachshit. The gvura itself is praiseworthy, is an ornament, because the ornament is, this is something that's so important for me that I'm willing to put in the effort. That's the first place that Rav Kook starts. Continues Rav Kook, we're back on the sheet, everybody can see it. Afal pi, says Rav Kook, but they have another opinion. The Hachamim said, what are you talking about? Armaments, war is gnai, it's a bad thing, says Rav Kook. Afal pi, she'etzem midat gvura hi tiferet v'tachshit la'adam. It is true, says Rav Kook, that strength in itself is a beauty of man. It's an ornament for a human being. Aval, so why do Hachamim disagree? Hachamim didn't think that ether was a good thing. They didn't think that gvura was a good thing. Why did the Hachamim disagree with that point? Aval ha'ofen asher nishtamshu bo ad ko b'nei adam begvuratam mimuchuar harbe. Says Rav Kook, what did the Hachamim say? The wise, the Hachamim, those who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer said, the way that it was used in their strength was very hurtful, was very negative. It is true that strength is a good thing, but when the strength is used in a bad way to overcome, I want to be evil. I think that being evil is so important that even when there are obstacles to being evil, like prison or good people are doing good, or they're my obstacles, I'm going to overcome them. then the Gvura isn't good. I.e., strength is an idea that I've said what's important and I've gone to achieve it. But if what's important for you is a negative thing, then suddenly strength becomes a negative thing in itself. That being strong to do evil is obviously a bad thing. So the Hachamim's argument with Rabbi Eliezer is very deep now. Rabbi Eliezer says, you know what strength is? Strength is a declaration that I have an ideal that's more important than my own personal gain, than my own personal nochut, my own personal tranquility. And therefore, I'm going to make all the effort to get in and I'm going to fight. And clearly fighting, nobody enjoys fighting. Nobody thought that fighting was a good thing. And therefore, to fight, you have to work hard. And therefore, we see when we have someone even fighting who is, has the vessels of war, that's something we should commendable. That's a tachshit. Hachamim said, you have a problem. The problem with that idea is that there are many people who use strength in a negative way. When strength is used in a negative way, you can't always say that strength is a good thing. It is true that the concept of having strength, the concept of saying, here's an ideal, I'm going to go and achieve it, is a good thing. What if what you want to achieve is a negative thing? What is it when strength is used to do destructive things in the world? And therefore, strength cannot always be a good thing. It is true that strength is sometimes, and maybe we hope often, and maybe even the majority, is something that's commendable. But if we would have, let's imagine that we have two teams of experts or expert scientists, one of whom is now doing all the effort to find a vaccination for COVID-19. And another team who's making an incredible effort to enhance COVID-19, to make it more powerful and more resilient to the vaccination. Both of them are putting in a tremendous amount of effort. Clearly, one of them, we would think, is good, and one of them is evil. Both of them are putting effort, and they're losing sleep over it, and they're thinking, and they're coming in, and they're trying different things. But it's clear that the first we would say is commendable, and the second we would say is negative. That's really the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Hachamim. Is strength, says Rav Kook, always a good thing? Or can strength be used in such a negative way that it's something that we find mechuar, we find ugly? Continues Rav Kook. Uba'asher klei zayin. So what do we do with armaments? What do we do with weapons? Shashimush bo hu berubo rak lera'a. Most of the times, most weapons in the world are used negatively. Most weapons are used, what Bush called weapons of destruction, weapons of mass destruction. Most weapons are used bad. It is true that you could use weapons to defend yourself. And in fact, we call our army not the army of attack, but the army of defense. Sva Hagana Yisrael, an army of defense. That can be used, but Barov, that's not what's used. Most times in the world, weapons are invented to cause harm, not to cause good. Hu moreh, says Rav Kook, it shows yoter al ashchatat enoshit, it shows more of the destruction of humanity, mima shemoreh al tiferet gvura tzvuna bekirbo, more than it shows the commendable nature of this human strength that we have. Al kain einam ele gnai, and therefore it's negative. Says Rav Kook, the machloket in the Mishnah between Rabbi Eliezer and Hachamim is about what do we think of strength in general, but even more specifically when we apply that to war. Rabbi Eliezer says strength, no one wants war. Rabbi Eliezer was not more of a warmonger than the Hachamim were. But Rabbi Eliezer said, I commend the young men and women who lose sleep, who spend their hours, who have difficult conditions in order to defend you and I, that we can sit here and enjoy the shiur, that we can sit here safely and have this discussion. And so that strength in itself is commendable. It's true that war is negative, but that strength and the ability to overcome something, that I enjoy people who have overcome things so much that becomes a tachshit, that becomes something that is a ornament. Hachamim said, but you can't ignore that war is a bad thing. And therefore, while we agree with you that gvura is a good thing, the problem is that the way it is used is often used negatively. That war is a tool of destruction. And so in Rav Kook's very, very deep explanation of the Mishnah, I understood the Mishnah very simply. Before Rav Kook, I understood the Mishnah as a machloket. The machloket in the Mishnah is, halachically, is a gun muksa or not? And a little bit more explanation of that is it considered to be a good thing or a bad thing that there's war in the world? Rav Kook said that's not the argument at all. The argument is, what do we look at? The difference between gvura and milchama. Gvura, strength, we all agree is a good thing. We all agree that this idea that there's somebody who overcame obstacle, and whether that obstacle is a physical obstacle, a spiritual obstacle, an intellectual obstacle, we commend people who overcome obstacles, who don't sit back and say, no, nebuch, we know that we can do. People who have, we can imagine the strength of the people who compete in sports, of the sportsmen, the strength of the scientist, the strength of the soldier, the strength of the person who's disabled and overcomes their disability. That strength is so commendable that any expression of strength is a good thing. We come and say, look at that, that's amazing. And therefore, even when that strength is an external strength, like having weaponry, like having an arsenal, like having a armory, that is still considered to be something that's so commendable that we would call it a tachshit, we would call it an ornament. The Chachamim don't disagree that gvura is a good thing. The Chachamim agree that gvura is a wonderful thing. That strength, that our ability to overcome difficult circumstances is an amazing part of humanity. That humanity's ability to overcome difficult times, difficult obstacles, as we say in whatever arena that is, that we agree, of course, is commendable. The only difference that we have is that we think that many times weapons, instead of being positive, are used for the negative, are used for destruction. And therefore, your example of weapons are gvura, and therefore, ipso facto, are good, that we disagree with. But we don't disagree that gvura is a wonderful thing. We don't disagree that there's a great place for gvura. And it therefore ties in with what we were speaking about last week, that the ability to overcome our natural inclination, that's really matanot gdolot. That's really matanot yafot. That's really the great gifts that God gives us. And that sometimes has to come through effort, through, as we said, yisurim. And then, so that's the basic argument that we have between them. And then Rav Kook says, so why, if that's the case, how do we understand that verse? Let's look at the verse again from Isaiah that's written above the gates of the United Nations. And they will beat their swords into plowshares, and their shields into mizmarot, into shears. And they will not, a nation will not lift up a sword against another nation, and they will not learn again war. Says Rav Kook, there's a very fascinating idea here. There are two parts of the verse that we listen to. The verse in Isaiah says there won't be any more weapons. There won't be any more arsenal. There won't be any more swords and spears and any other of those klei milchama, of those elements of war that we saw in the beginning of the Mishnah. That's the first element. There won't be weaponry. But you know what? People don't need weaponry to fight each other. But nations won't fight against each other. Not all weapons are used between nations. Weapons are used often between individuals within the same nation. Most gun crime isn't between nations. It's among the nations themselves. What does that verse mean? What does Isaiah mean that nations won't learn war? And then he comes to speak about what is the elements of war among nations. That's the third passage in these passages of Einayah that Rav Kook speaks about this Mishnah with us. Hanigud animsa ben goy legoy. The difference between nations. Once we say there is a nation, there is a difference between that nation and another nation. The essence of nations is that we are different from each other. The essence of nations is that there is a border that separates us. There is a nature that makes us different from each other. And therefore, goy, once I say the concept of having a nation, that is exclusive. That is distinctive. That makes us different from another nation. Otherwise, we don't need to be nations. There'll be a brotherhood of man, as we said before. John Lennon sings about that. We don't need to have different nations. But the idea that there are different nations means that we are different from each other. And therefore, we are sometimes contrary to each other. The difference between nations, the whole time that it is needed, there is sometimes a need to have different nations. There is a need to have nations that will do different things. And in fact, the League of Nations, the United Nations, come with different agenda. And sometimes those agenda are important. It's important that we have differences between nations. Though if we were all the same, then we wouldn't be able to develop in different ways and to complement each other. And in fact, that's the story of the beginning of the creation. That's the story of the Migdal Bavel. The second parasha of the Torah, Parashat Noach, concludes with the story of how we separated out into different nations, which is a story that ancient man, of course, would tell themselves, each other, how is it possible that we came from Adam, from one person, from one beginning, whether we call it Adam Arishon or Lucy in the genetic arena, which as a person who was the original gene pool of humanity that moved from being prehistoric man to being modern man, whatever we call it is irrelevant. How do we get to be different nations? How do we get to the point that we're so different, the differences between one country and another? It is necessary. That is the rectification of the world. Migdal Bavel, what happened when they came together to build a tower, they weren't able. Only when they were separated were they able to build, were they able to control, were they able to go and inhabit the world. And therefore, there should be different nations. There should be different places. There should be different, we shouldn't all just be the same. And that develops the world. The world is developed by the fact that there are different nations. Sometimes there are also competitions between nations. There's a competitiveness between who's going to win the Olympic Games, who's going to win the Nobel Prize. And in fact, when the Nobel Prize is won, and I'm sure everybody here would like to be in that position, win a Nobel Prize, they fly, and we've spoken about this before, above the hotel where the Nobel laureates are sleeping, the flag of their country. What does it matter? It's my personal achievement. No, it's an achievement. I think the statement is that it's somehow an expression of your effort of your country, of your nation. And therefore, when countries have that sometimes healthy competition with each other, that develops the world. And the fact, and Rav Kook writes about this in many places, in the idea that each nation has its own ophi, its own nature, that's a good thing. We're different. We just have to go to a shul in which we have Yekis and Lithuanians and a few token Sfardim, and you'll see how different nations are, how different their expressions of what's important and different of how they run their time. You know, that if you go to an Ashkenazi shul, what's the first thing you ask when you go to a new Ashkenazi shul? Not how good it is a Kiddush. That's the second question. The first question is, what time does Tefillah start? No. The most important question is, when does it end? When does the Tefillah end? You go to a Sephardi shul, what's the most important question? When does the Tefillah start? Whenever we start, that's good. Whenever it ends, it ends. And the reality is that the Ashkenazim never end on time and the Sephardim never start on time. And that's part of the difference of nations. That's a good thing. That's an idea. We've come from those different places who have different approaches to how do we use time, to how do we use space, to what is important to us. That has developed the world. And the beautiful thing is that when we've come back to Israel and when we come back from these different places, if we brought different types of ways of living, different foods, different music, different attitudes, different cultures, and we have gained from all those different places. That's why Rav Kook said we went into Galut, is to learn from those different countries. And since there is a difference, since there is a competition, since there is a difference between nations, there has to be the fear of war. Because what does war come? We fight those that are different from us. We don't fight those that are the same as us. We fight in families, those that are the same as us. But we wage war against those that are different. Once we say there are differences, there will be the threat of war. There may not always be war. There's not war between every single country wages war against each other. Even in the world wars, not every single country in the world took part. But the idea that there is a threat of war, it will happen because we are different. But says Rav Kook, we had to be different. That was Migdal Bavel. We don't want to be the same. We wanted to develop these different attitudes, the different parts of humanity. And therefore, there's sort of a stira in the creation of the world. That once we were spread out in Migdal Bavel, once we became different nations, once we became Ammon and Moab and Midian and Chel, Paras, and Madai, once we became these different nations, in each one had their own experience, their own development, their own nature, their own characteristics, and that was good for the creation of the world. We opened up the possibility that they would fight each other, that we would have war. וצריך חרב מוכנה, מוכנת בכף כדי להשוות את המשקל של הכוח. And therefore, they needed to have a sword to be ready. A nation, in order to survive, needs to understand its ability to fight. And all nations that could not fight disappeared from the world stage. And we've spoken about that many times before. Rav Kook's whole concept that there is a physical ideal, a national ideal, and there's a spiritual ideal. A country, a nation, a society that loses one of those will not survive. If there's no reason to fight, if there's no spiritual nature, if there's nothing that makes us different, we will not fight. But if we're not able to defend ourselves, then we will disappear as well. And we see that in nations that were developed nations that are overcome by other nations and disappear because they weren't able to fight. And therefore, if we want there to be different countries, if there are different countries that are going to survive play their time on the world stage, then they need to be able to fight. They need to be able to defend themselves. And the reason they need to have weapons is in order there shouldn't be war. They don't want to have weapons. Let's have the most weapons, so we'll fight. But sort of like the Cold War that in the 50s and 60s that survived in order to stop there being a fight. The more that we're able to defend, look, I have my gun, I have my sword here, I have my gun here. Don't start with me, because if you start with me, I will fight back. And therefore, the threat of war will be alleviated by the presence of weaponry. So that says Rav Kook. We could discuss whether that's true or not, whether history has played that out or not. But that's an idea I think that's quite commonly understood, that that's a reason for having weaponry. But if we understand that what Rav Kook is saying is that we don't cherish the gun. We don't live by the sword like Esav was supposed to do. We have a sword to enable us to live without the sword. We want to be able to develop, all countries want to be able to develop, and therefore the presence of the sword is able to enable them to develop, not to use that just to fight and destroy and destroy. V'zoti hoda v'hadra shel hachev, and that is the use and the beauty. Again, we spoke about an ornament, the ornamental nature of the sword, i.e. its use of this is what enables our country to be able to develop. That through its strength of the sword, through the presence of the sword, the world is able to develop in different ways. Once we have different nations will have different natures. Different natures will give rise potentially to war. And therefore, the presence of the sword is the ability to defend ourselves and to ensure that we won't have to fight real wars in order to actually develop our own nations all separately and all differently. And therefore, what it does, it preserves peace. We have the United Nations peacekeeping force. The peacekeeping force doesn't walk around with doves and with daisies, putting them into the giving out doves to the other nations. They walk around with tanks and with guns and in order to preserve peace. Why do we want to have to preserve that peace? Because we want to enable those nations to develop. But its real essence is, but its real essence is that it shouldn't be used, it should be an ornament. Another expression, says Rav Kook, of ornament. What does Rabbi Eliezer say it's an ornament? An ornament is something that really we have no use for. We just have it. A brooch or a necklace or earrings. You can live your whole life without actually wearing earrings. Look, I can show you. I can show you here. Lived my whole life, not one earring, not in my nose, not in my navel, no earrings at all. Why do we have earrings? They're an ornament, they're beautiful. In fact, that's a whole other area in halakha, which is related to this, is a person allowed to wear ornaments outside, because the possibility is that they will come to remove them and show the ornament to somebody else. Look at this beautiful earring, look at this beautiful necklace. I think if you have a piercing in your navel, you're less likely to open and show it to somebody else in the street. But I don't know. I never had that experience, so I don't know what to compare it to. However, the idea of a tachshit is something that we don't want to use. That's the whole point of it, and that's why the Gemara says, maybe you'll take it. Why would you use it? I use it. Well, maybe I'll take it off. If I take it off, I show someone else, then it becomes something that the use is to take it off. I.e., a tachshit, says Rabbi Eliezer, is something we don't want to use. A tachshit, why does he use that amazing? He says that a sword is an ornament. An ornament is something you never use. Why should we never use it? We don't want to fight. The whole point was to defend nations, to enable them to develop. In order to enable them to develop, we had to defend them. And defending them was not using the sword, but the presence of the sword. And therefore it's a tachshit. Shekoach hanigud yeh bekoach. That the strength of our differences will develop. We want to have different nations. And the different nations, therefore, will develop the world. But once we have different nations, we open up the possibility of war. Once we open up the possibility of war, what do we need? We need to have something that stops war. What will stop war? That's the koach of the sword. The sword will be that thing that will say, oh, let's stop war, because we have, in the same way that you have weapons, we have weapons. And therefore, if you use your weapons, we'll use weapons. And therefore, the weapons become something that we don't use. They become a tachshit. Kedei letamem et koach goy, letamem et kol goy al pi tzivim echad. In order to awaken and enable each nation to develop its own nature, its own characteristics, its own place in the world. That is the element of having different nations. That's what we want. But we don't want it to be used to spill blood. We don't want to use the weapons. We want the weapons to be that thing that stops us fighting. And therefore it becomes a tachshit. The Rabbi Eliezer didn't say, when you use the sword and cut someone's head off, then it's a tachshit. No, it's a tachshit when you don't use it, says Rav Kook. So why do we need it? We need it for something completely different. We need it to develop the nations, to enable nations to develop. Wait a second. If that's the case, now you have to explain to me the verse in Yeshayahu. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev velo yilmadu od milchama. Nations won't fight against other nations. But you just told me that nations are important for each other. Says the Kook, wait. Omnam b'yemot hamashiach. However, in the Messianic era, le'et asher tidbashel ha'enoshut legamwe. What does it mean, the Messianic era? The Messianic era, says Rav Kook, is that humanity has reached its pinnacle. Humanity has reached the point that it's supposed to get to. It's already achieved what it was put in this world to do. And therefore, each of the nations really have done what they were supposed to do. We can imagine that the world is like a team of workers in a high-tech firm. Each one gets their own project. And when they have to develop their project by themselves. So you have a writer, and you have a developer, and you have someone who's writing the language, and someone who's testing it, and someone who's working on marketing. They're all they have different tasks, they're different types of people, different jobs, and they come together eventually every so often to say, how are we doing? When they have each completed their project, and they may complete their project completely different times. The developer may have finished well before they've been testing it, and the tester may finish well before they marketed it. But at some point when they've all finished, the product will be perfect. That product is called humanity. And each nation, whether the nation still exists or was and has disappeared, each nation contributes their part to the completion of humanity. What is the Messianic era? When we fulfill the project. When the Mashiach will come, when we don't need to fight anymore. When we've achieved that every nation has got to the best it could possibly be, and humanity has reached its pinnacle. What will happen then? The world is already ready. Az yasur koach hanigud mishavsho. Then we won't need any difference, because the only reason we need a difference was because in order for you to develop, you can't. Don't speak to the marketing person until you finished your development, Because if you're thinking about marketing, you're not developing. Develop first. Don't speak to them. But if we finish the project, then we have a big celebration at the end, because now we don't need to be different. And therefore, Rav Kook says the Messianic era is when all the nations become the same. When all the nations, we break down the walls that separate nations, because we've all achieved that which we were able to do separately. We have now, as a conglomerate project, achieved that. And therefore, we don't need to have differences. And the difference that should be between the nations will already exist, and in our ability to control that. In the same way that we have different limbs in a body. The different limbs in the body each have their own task. My hands are used for talking, right? That's why, you shut a Jew up by tying his hands together. So my hands are very important for talking. My ears are used for listening, my eyes for seeing, etc. But my body works as a conglomerate sense. We don't fight each other. Even though we're different, we don't fight each other. It's not in the end of the day, all nations will be the same. There'll be one brotherhood of man will be the same, but all the nations will work together. And therefore, if all the nations are together, what will we not need? We won't need the cherif. There'll be no reason to have that deterrent to war, because we won't need a war anymore. War will be irrelevant. We'll realize that we're working together. It's very possible that if you have an office in which people do different tasks, that there's sometimes a bit of a tension there, because the marketing people are working very, very hard, and they look at the development guys. They seem to have a lot of time. They're always around the coffee corner. They're always they don't know that they're doing things at home. They don't know that they're very, very intensive when they work, and therefore they need to have longer breaks. And so there's sometimes tension between them. And the deterrent, we need to have a deterrent to stop that tension occurring. But if at the end of the day we realize we're all working for this one giant goal, then it doesn't matter how much effort I put in, you put in, we're all working on our own pace, in our own place. That is the project of humanity, is that at the end of the day, when we work together, we don't need to have the deterrent, because what will deter us from fighting each other? Our understanding that we're working together. There's no tension. That tension will disappear. Ki ein kan afilu koach ganuz sheyesh lo efsharut להתפרץ לכלל מלחמות, because there's nothing even hidden that could break out into war. There's no more war. When will there be no more war? Not that it will all love each other. There'll be no more war in which humanity has reached the pinnacle in which you understand that we're really working for the same aim, which is to make a Kadosh Baruch Hu God over the world, to make this world complete, to achieve the aims of making a just society for all humanity. And therefore, that's the Messianic era in which we don't need to fight each other anymore. We don't need to fight because we were different. Now we understand, even though we're different, our differences complement each other. And therefore, we don't need the sword anymore. What will happen with the sword? We'll make it into plowshares. We'll use it to work together to make a better world. And therefore, there'll be complete peace. And there will be friendliness, honor, respect among nations. And therefore, we won't need the beauty, the ornament of the weapons, because we don't need them anymore. Rav Kook says, in my opinion, a very, very fascinating idea. Rav Kook says that why do we need to have weaponry? Because weaponry was, and armaments were, the deterrent from fighting each other that enabled us to develop as nations. Why do we need to have different nations? Because each nation has its own different characteristic, its own place where it excels. But that idea of, and therefore, since we are different, we fight each other. Like you have in a family, the two different children will fight each other because they're different, because they have different things are important for them. However, when we understand that we're working together, when we've reached that point in which our country has reached its pinnacle, we've done our part for the project, and we understand that you've done your part for the project. We don't need to fight anymore. And therefore, the idea of armaments will fall away, because we don't even need that deterrent to fighting, because there'll be no reason to fight anymore. That's the sort of complex dichotomy that we understand between war and not war. We do not embrace war. And yet we understand that sometimes war is a necessity, but we would prefer to have armaments that prevent war from happening in order to develop each of the nations. However, why does the Torah speak so much about peace in eventual times? Because Rav Kook says that in eventual times, the differences between nations will be erased to the point that they won't be they won't be contradict each other. Rather, they will complement each other. They will come together as different nations to work together. I was thinking about this idea, this passage, in the light of the coronavirus that we're in at the moment. Two very fascinating things happened, I think, in the past 2 months that have really brought to light what Rav Kook says. The first is that almost every country understood that in order to survive and preserve itself, it had to close its borders. One of the first things that we did in Israel, one of the first things that was done in many countries, was to stop people coming into our borders. What does that mean? I.e., we closed our country just to the people in our country. In Israel, we did an even more fascinating thing, is that we flew back Israelis. It was the longest flight that ever has happened from Australia, direct flight to Israel, to fly back Israelis who were in New Zealand and in Australia who were stuck there, who were coming back. People who have been there for maybe some time, who weren't planning to come back. We flew people back from Peru back here. What happened? What did we just say? We said that it's important, a country is important, that the borders of the country are what's important, and therefore the allegiance of that Israeli, l'she'avar, that past Israeli in New Zealand, is in fact his or her allegiance to Israel is greater than their allegiance to New Zealand or Australia or the place that they happen to find themselves. And that's a very important message about the difference between nations. But then something else happened, that now that we've overcome that we closed our borders, another very fascinating thing happened. I heard this from Rabbi Sachs in the name of Bill Gates. I did not hear it from Gates himself. I heard it from Rabbi Sachs in the name of Bill Gates. That he said that here we have a world war, but we're all on the same side. The whole world is fighting today against the same thing. And this never happened in the history of humanity. In the history of humanity, we had lots of world wars, but we're always fighting against each other. Suddenly we have a common enemy for the whole world, which is this little tiny microscopic virus that we can't even see. And this has somehow brought our nations to work together. In fact, there have been nations that have been in war for each other, that have stopped fighting each other because they understand that we have a common enemy that's more important, which is overcoming illness. Suddenly we're in a phase of this messianic era. On the one hand, we're understanding the importance of different nations, but on the other hand, we're understanding how the nations really are founded and connected together. And so really here we have this passage, this change, this shift between Lo Yisa Goy El Goy. We won't have difference of nations. We become very strongly entrenched in our nation place, in our place as different countries with different expressions of different characters, different natures, different places, different borders. But suddenly we lo yisa al goy cherev. We're not fighting each other, not because we love each other. There is no love lost between the nations that stop fighting. There's not suddenly they put down their guns and arms because they love each other. Because they suddenly realize that that's not a deterrent to make us improve, to make us better. There's something that's more important, and that's fighting together against the virus. And that's almost the Messianic era. I won't kid myself that it's 100% a Messianic era, but I think that it's a very interesting, fascinating idea that Rav Kook says. Rav Kook said that the Mishnah discusses, what do we think about weapons? Do we think that they're an ornament, or do we think that they're a slur? And the reality is that it depends how you look at ornaments and how you look at a slur. Rav Kook says two different ideas. The first idea is that both the Hachamim and Rabbi Eliezer both agree that gvura, that strength, the ability to overcome, is a very commendable and very praiseworthy thing. However, they disagree on how weapons are used. Rabbi Eliezer says that since they are a weapon of strength, they must be good. And the Hachamim said, but they're used in a bad way. They're not necessarily, if so fact, they have to be good. And then Rav Kook said, the understanding of the pasuk gives us an even deeper understanding of what's a tachshit and what's not a tachshit. An ornament is something that we never use. An ornament is something that is ornate. And in fact, it's something that you have that you are not going to use for another. You don't take your earrings and use them to know, to screw on a screw on your bed table. They're earrings. They're something that they have a special use for them. They're not used other than for that thing which is just to be ornate, just to be jewelry, just to be beautiful, to be there. Says Rav Kook, that use of Rabbi Eliezer's term takshitim related to armaments is because the armaments come to do something very important. Arms come to stop us fighting each other, to enable us to develop as separate nations. When we have separate nations, that each nation has its own special nature, its own special contribution to the nation of man, to the brotherhood of humanity, the possibility is that we'll open ourselves up to fight each other. But when we have arms, they are a deterrent to war. We only need a deterrent when war is something that will push us forward, because it expresses the difference between us. If you want to be the most different from your neighbor, you have to fight them to show we're different from them. Look at them, look at us, we fight them, and therefore we are separate from them. We are different from them. But in the Messianic era, we don't need to fight with them. We don't need to be separate from them, because we've reached the pinnacle of humanity in which each nation has contributed its best to the project that is the brotherhood of humanity, the brotherhood of man. And as we said, I think in these 2 months we've seen a pendulum swing between the importance of nations, of individual nations, of separate nations, of borders, of how strong a border can be, how strong a border can stop a person, not the virus itself, but the person carrying the virus coming in and out. So we've spoken about nations, lo yisa goya goy cherev, but we've understand that what's stopping us fighting is not the cherev. What's stopping us fighting is the common enemy. When we come to fight together, then we recognize that we don't need to have swords. We need to have something that is more important. We need to have gvura. The obstacle we have is illness, and the power that we have to overcome it is our determination and motivation to create a better world. So I thought that was a nice Motzei Yom Ha'atzmaut understanding of how do we look at our own strength as a nation, our own place as a nation, and also maybe a deeper message into what's going on at the moment, to look at, are we more together or are we more separate? Are there things definitely to make us separate? Sure, Israel is separate from the other nations. In fact, more separate than ever been before. There are more people, there are more human beings, Israelis in Israel now than have ever been in humanity's history. Why is that? Because no one's going anywhere. Used to be, there was X number of Israelis in the world, but most of them were in Chutz La'aretz. Now we're all here. We're not going anywhere. And so now we're all Israelis here. If you're an Israeli, you're in Israel. That's it. So we've spoken about the importance of nationhood, but also the importance of not having war that is a thing that separates between us, but having a common enemy, which is in this case illness, that binds us together and to create Bezrat Hashem a closer step towards the Messianic era when we humanity will reach our pinnacle to understand, to make a world that is better not only for ourselves but is better for everyone else. Shalom, shalom. Thank you very much.